My name's John Featherstone. I'm one of the founders and partners of a lighting, visual, and media design practice called Lightswitch. And I'm the show designer, along with my collaborators, for Hans Zimmer Live. And we're here in Frankfurt for our concert. It's a great question what Hans's vision is, because obviously there's two very distinct different parts of the offerings that Hans does from a live perspective. World of Hans Zimmer is symphonic and a deeper dive into the storytelling Hans does with a symphony orchestra. The world of Hans Zimmer focuses on a whole different kind of show than Hans Zimmer Live. Hans Zimmer Live is frankly a lot more like a rock concert. Working with Hans is amazing because everything is about being in service to story. He's a storyteller without words. You know, he uses music to capture emotion. So that's always at the core of everything we do with Hans Zimmer Live, is how do we take those stories? How do we capture them and take them from right there on the stage to even the furthest away seat in the arena? So Hans is always very interested in how we present the shows visually. The world of Hans Zimmer leans a little more into movie content. In Hans Zimmer Live, we're telling a similar story, but in a different way, in perhaps a more immersive way that is focused on the music as standalone pieces and less on the notion of them being attached to the movie. Hans, as a storyteller, is really a great aficionado and lover of live theater experiences. So the lighting is very theatrical. One of the things that we believe our role is as lighting designers is to do two things. One, be in service to the music, always. It always starts with the music. But secondly, is to always be in service to the musicians. So what we do a lot is work on ways that we can lift each of the members of the band, because every single member of the band is a virtuoso in their own right. So we see it as a series of vignettes or pieces, each one of which focus a different musician, whether it be Pedro, our amazing woodwind player, or Rosanda, our lead violinist, or Holly and Aisha, our drummers. Each of these different parts of the mix, which is the band, need to be elevated at different parts. So we use light as a tool to help the audience understand where to look, who's being featured, and to guide them on a journey through each of these pieces, because some of the pieces are 20+ minutes long. So the audience, we think, needs a helping hand to guide them through this arc of a storytelling. And that was working strongly with Derek, who's the set designer, a longtime friend of Hans and a great collaborator with me on several other projects as well. And Derek conceived of this notion of levels, which obviously is a very theatrical technique, but it's really important to make sure that nobody feels that they're hidden away, and it gives a lot of places for people to go and to play. The big center area, which has Hans's giant modular synth, which is named Giorgio, in homage to Giorgio Moroder, is an area that gives us a secondary staging area that's elevated above the main stage. You know, it's a 3-hour show. Hans is always focused on delivering value to the audience. When we started, his original set list was 6 hours, which made Christoph and Thomas and Dieter from Semmel go, that's great, but we can't do a 6-hour concert. So it's always hard. It's like picking your favorite children with Hans's set. What do we include? What do we not include? But it's a long show, so we always want to make sure we save some surprises even to the very end of the journey. So there's always something new and always something exciting for the audience. The lighting system is a testament to my addiction to Robe fixtures, that it's all Robe fixtures. The bulk of the work is the Robe Megapoint, which I think is an incredible, versatile, flexible lighting fixture that can do these brilliant pencil-like beams, but also beautiful, soft, theatrical, textural gobo washes. I think a lot of people think of the Megapoint as sort of like a one-trick pony, that it's just a beam light. It's not. It's an incredibly versatile fixture. In addition, along the downstage edge of the stage and on these vertical towers throughout the audience, we have Robe Tetras, which are a linear bar, LED bar type fixture that tilts or pans the way we've got them arranged. But one of the great things about them is they also have this beautiful, delicate flower effect. The same technology is used in the Spider and some of the other Robe fixtures. Front light is Robe BMFLs, and we have 9 RoboSpots as part of it. A lot of the rig is mounted on 6 kinetic trusses on cyber hoists. And we use that as a real musical piece. So the rig itself can move and breathe and sometimes come low and be intimate and theatrical, sometimes be random and chaotic, and sometimes be incredibly powerful, and use the music to always feel like the music itself is lifting and pushing and pulling the rig. Hans and I spoke a lot early in the design process about a system that really felt like it breathed, that it breathes with the music. So it feels that the music is pushing parts of the rig away and pulling them back. So we do that physically with the trusses on cyber hoists, as well as creatively using the fixtures. The other thing you'll notice is the fronts of a lot of the trusses that are visible have these mirror panels on. What we wanted to do was not have the aesthetic of open truss, and also not have the, we're trying to hide it but it won't go away, of black drape. So we wanted something interesting and dynamic, and we bounce light off these mirrors and we get these amazing faceted beams shooting from these mirror panels, which satis&fy did an incredible job of building for us, that really give the rig a sort of, almost looks like a piece of sculpture. One of the things that's great about this tour is it's such a partnership. There's a great collaboration between the design team and Thomas Schmidt from Samuel, who's the production director, who really helps us craft what we're doing from a show standpoint with Samuel, because it needs to be on time and on budget, as well as beautiful and immersive. And with Colin Pink, who you're going to talk to, and the rest of the audio team. And we're always talking about how we can ebb and flow between the visual and the sonic. Sometimes there are parts of the show where we say to Colin, hey, there's this little accent going on that if you lift it a little, we get a little more presence from the lighting. Sometimes there are things audio-wise that he says, there's a little piece going on here that you may have missed. So that collaboration is really important.
My name's Colin Pink. I'm front of house engineer on Hans Zimmer Live. I think Hans is all about showing off the talent of the team, be it the band or the technicians. So it's really nice. You do have an organic feel, and you do highlight different aspects of that. And again, that's where the collaboration helps, just knowing, you know, what we're going to focus on where, and whether that's orally, visually, or both, kind of helps pull it all together. As far as an audio mix, it's quite complex because, as you say, we mix a lot of synthesizer content with a lot of, basically you've got a standard band, an orchestra, synth and playback effects. And I tend to treat them quite separately because they all have very different dynamic ranges. So I'm actually using a TC M6000, and I'm using, 3 of the engines doing kind of mastering. And I master the playback, the band and the drums separately. And then I also master the orchestra and the vocals, but in a different way. I've got a couple of Rupert Neve Portico 2s, essentially doing the same thing. It's all about controlling the different dynamics to pull it into the same world. I always try and make the internal balance on stage right, because that makes the whole dynamic of the show much easier to deal with. On this show, that's slightly tricky again, because there's so many, you know, such a mix of electronic and acoustic. To try and minimize that, you know, anything live is pretty much close mic'd. You know, all the strings are on the new Neumann MCMs, which are great. You know, the drums fairly standard, but a lot of SE mics. Same on woodwind. So it's getting everything in close and then using the processing to try and smooth it out and make it feel like the mics are further away. Digico is normally my preferred desk for the sort of shows I do. Tend to be quite large or multi-band. You know, I look after the Brit Awards and the MTV European Music Awards, and I find that the Digicos are so flexible and so fast that when things change a lot, it's really easy to adapt. This is actually an SD7 Quantum with the T software, which is fairly unusual, I think. What I'm doing on this show, and we can talk about the rig a bit more, I'm zoning the stage. Essentially, I haven't got Timax. They didn't have it on the shelf, so the T software has a cross-point delay matrix on it. So I've split the stage into 16 zones. Not for the main PA, because it's an array, you can't really time it that accurately to each zone. So I'm using 8 individual outputs for the front fills and putting them through the cross-point delay so that I can time align each area of the stage to each individual front fill, which gives a much more coherent sound down the front. By the time you get back here, obviously you're just essentially listening to the left-right without the acoustic from the stage. So it doesn't matter so much. I'm using the T software mainly for that. Most of the effects are internal. I've got quite a few on this. We've got the usual amount of reverbs, a DDL. I use the aural enhancers quite a lot, just to give some saturation to individual instruments. I'm using external outboard. I've got the TCM 6000. 3 engines are doing the mastering algorithm, the MD4, just to get my different sections into the same kind of space. And then the 4th engine is doing a nice reverb for the orchestra. Then I've got 2 Rupert Neve Portico 2s, as I mentioned before, inserted across the vocal bus, just to kind of bring them together and make them nice and forward. And the other one's on the playback, mainly just to give it a bit more width. Talking of width, I am doing something slightly naughty, for want of a better word. The monitors is using the Klang conductor, so all of the in-ears are in binaural. I've even gone to the point to spec binaural audience mics so that the ambience is in the same kind of space as the rest of the performance, so that everything ties in. It just makes it feel like you're not isolated so much. But because we had some around, I plugged a Klang system into my desk, and I'm using that on the playback stems as well. Obviously not in binaural headphones, but essentially it works a bit like, if any of your listeners are old enough, back in the 80s on your beatbox you had your stereo extra wide button. Essentially I'm using Klang as a very expensive version of that, so I'm kind of spreading the choirs and the supplemental string pads, because the problem with this show is, because there's so many inputs, getting space in the mix is really difficult. So that just helped kind of spread any of the supplemental stuff quite wide, so that there's room for the live band in the middle, and still give them a bit of a stereo feel. So yes, I don't know if Klang would be happy with me, but I'm yes, using that on a PA, and as long as you're fairly subtle with it, it really works if you've got anything that you just want spreading. I'm not using it on any percussive stuff, just the kind of pads, just to give some space in the middle. The PA is L-Acosutics. It's K1 with K2 downfills, KS28s behind. We have 15 aside in a lumps of 3 cardioid. And because we've got quite a lot of low end from the main system, the side hangs are Cara, because we don't need to add more wafty low mid. Front fills, we have A10s sitting on E15s. Everything else is running through the P1 processor, but the front fills are going direct from the desk to the amps, so that we can do the time alignment to each kind of area of the stage. So we're using K1, K2 here. I was lucky enough to be able to use the L2 system at the Brit Awards, which is, it is amazing. It is so transparent, so smooth in the top end. It's incredibly light and fast to rig, which suddenly opens up a lot more possibilities for Elisa rigs, because weight is normally the big problem with that, and speed of flying. The way you can change between cardioid and hypercardioid is really useful, because it just gives you a chance to A/B very different propagating systems. So if you're not quite sure what's going to suit best in a room, it's just, you know, really easy to swap between the two and find out how it interlaps. And actually at the Brits we did quite a lot of experimenting, and at one point we had the mains in cardioid and the side hangs in hypercardioid. We ended up doing the whole lot in hypercardioid. L2 is an amazing system and well worth a listen. It doesn't replace K1, it doesn't throw as far, but because it's fast, you know, it's easier to deal with putting up delays, etc. And yeah, it's great. I'm just wondering, with the naming, whether there's an L1 that's going to come out at some point, but I guess we'll all have to wait and see.
My name's Chris Herman. I'm the lighting programmer for the Hans Zimmer live tour.
I'm Hailey Featherstone, and I'm the lighting director.
John Featherstone's the lighting designer on this show. I have worked for Lightswitch, which is his company, a bunch for a lot of the other partners. This is the first show I've actually programmed for him specifically, and the first time I've gotten to work with Hailey as a lighting designer as well. And the three of us all got together in Brooklyn a year ago before the show actually went out, and we spent 2 weeks pre-visiting the whole show. We used Depends previous software for that, and I got a lot of support from those guys, and they're great, so a little plug there. But working together is great. We all come from different backgrounds and are also at different points in our life, and our careers. So it's a big melting pot of good ideas.
We're just a really good balanced team. We get a lot of collaborative working together. A lot of the times John will sort of like sow the initial seeds of what he wants the pieces to feel like and how he wants everything to progress. And then he gives Chris and I a lot of freedom to really pepper in a lot of fun ideas on top of that foundation, which allows for us to make things that look really unique. I think one of the things that I really pride myself on for the whole team is that every piece in the show looks incredibly different. We worked really hard to transport the audience to the feeling of the movies that the pieces are from, rather than just doing what I think would be easier, which is sort of like a direct copy of how the movies look themselves. And I think that we're able to do that because of the really open communication, collaboration, and respect we all have for each other as creative, design-driven people.
We want it to feel sometimes high-tech. Dark Knight, it feels very high-tech, and the version of Dark Knight that's on this tour is very aggressive and very kind of almost punk meets EDM, so the rig feels very techno-ish. But for Gladiator, it needs to feel beautiful and organic and gentle and natural, and there's lots of patterns evocative of light coming through trees or sunlight through clouds, and a very sort of outdoors natural environment, again in homage to the way the movie was created, and thus the music that Hans created for the movie.
The music is incredibly emotive, so it's a really easy jumping off point.
Everybody cries.
Everybody cries. I've seen this show about 50 times now, and it's one of the only shows that I've been on tour with that I have seen this many times where there's still pieces of the music that really hit me, give me the goosebumps every night. So, I mean, it's honestly like such a gift to have that to start off with when we started the design process, to have music that is so emotional and evocative. It's a great jumping off point.
We all, we got sent the tracks before we started. We did not listen to them together. We were all in different places around, the world at that point. So like my first listen was at home in New York with a whiskey in my hand and like earphones on, turned up really loud. And, like the things that stuck to me on my like initial listen, were things I brought into previs. I was like, when I listened to this for the first time, like if I had only ever heard this for the first time, these are the things that stuck for me, and like, are those moments we should latch onto and use to reach audiences who may come to see the show who aren't as familiar with his work. To talk about the technical aspects of the show, there are 6 moving trusses, 2 static trusses that do not move during the show. There are 6 vertical towers. It's all run off a time-coded cyber hoist system, which allows us to do a lot of fun things with moving the trusses like big giant lights. It's about 180 megapoints, 24 wash beams. We got 9 robo spots and a whole lot of chasing time code and having a good time. John is, I think, if he were stranded on an island with only one choice of light, it would be the megapoint. So that's like the workhorse of the rig, which is great because I think it's that fixture has so many tools in it to be able to make it look different. Having an all-Roby rig having all the LED stuff be the same is fantastic because we all know that that's a nightmare to color match all the time.
I think it's been good to have a fixture that is so reliable and is also so versatile. We tore pretty hard for a pretty long time when we're out with this, so to have fixtures that are reliable is huge. From design perspective of things, it's an interesting challenge to have sort of like a limited amount of fixture types. It sort of makes you really like dig deeper into what you can do with that fixture. And I think that that limiting factor has had a really positive effect on the design, because we're able to really pull interesting things out. We want to be able to achieve a certain feeling. That's the most important thing. So sometimes shows that are lit with 4 light bulbs are more interesting than shows that are lit with 300 of whatever you want. You know, the limiting palette is it's a really good, interesting challenge here. At the end of the day, the music through the whole show is incredible. I mean, I grew up with The Lion King, so being able to hear Lebo sing like that every day, I mean, it's awesome. I think there's a couple of moments that are special because we've been able to create them. It might not necessarily hit the audience the same, but, you know, Chris and I really got to dig into the Dark Phoenix piece together. So I always love that piece because there's a lot of nuances in the music that we really picked out with the design choices and then translated into the programming of the song. So, I mean, I think creatively that's one of my favorite pieces, but there's also like a lot of little tidbits that we've pulled in from the movies.
There's definitely a lot of room for me when nobody's looking to nudge little things into the show that like nobody probably ever gets. And it's super subtle. Maybe you'll see the show now and see it and you'll be like, that guy's crazy.
I mean, Hans is great. He's been an incredible person to collaborate with. His love and appreciation for the production side of what we're doing here has allowed us to really have a design that has flourished. To be frank, there were a lot of things that we walked out of that initial previs with that we loved as lighting people, that we were like, there's no way we're going to get away with this when we bring it onto a stage and with real people. But then we were able to show Hans a lot of the previs captures with using Depends, and his appreciation for what we do in helping really like drive home what he's doing allowed us to keep most of the show like directly out of previs. It's really great to have a artist who like sees all that, sees the whole picture, and allows and trusts us to do the right thing.